candlelight trembles. In that flicker you can almost see how stories rule hearts. Long before screens and slogans, human voices learned to shape dreams, to turn fear into faith. From temples to towers, every age built its own mirrors, surfaces polished not to reflect the world, but to reflect what rulers wished us to see. This is the hidden current of history, the dark science of propaganda. It is the study of how minds are guided without chains, how emotion becomes empire. Listen closely. What you will hear are not lies but carefully tuned truths, each one built to feel safe, to feel right, to feel yours. The birth of influence. The story begins where writing itself was power. In the ancient cities of Egypt and Mesopotamia, priests carved symbols that joined heaven to throne. Each tablet, each monument was a message to the crowd. Pharaohs called themselves gods not out of vanity but strategy. When people saw the ruler as divine, obedience felt like worship. Hieroglyphs, hymns, and rituals became early propaganda, art that taught faith in hierarchy. Words were still rare, and rarity made belief sacred. To write was to shape reality. Centuries later, empires expanded this silent craft. Rome mastered spectacle. Triumphs marched through streets, parading trophies and captives to prove destiny favoured the Senate. Statues of emperors lined roads, their marble eyes following citizens like watchful stars. Every coin carried a portrait. Even trade was persuasion. When people held currency, they held ideology. The empire understood that repetition creates reverence. Meaning hides in these stones and songs. Propaganda's roots were not lies but language itself, the art of framing meaning before minds could resist. When kings built temples to their names, they were really building memory. To rule tomorrow, they had to occupy imagination today. The lesson never aged. This history shows that influence begins gently. A story repeated becomes tradition. Tradition becomes truth. The human brain hungers for pattern, for someone to explain why things happen. Propaganda feeds that hunger with certainty. It feels like guidance, not control. And so civilization marched under banners painted with comfort. Connection stretches from those stone walls to modern screens. We still worship symbols, flags, logos, followers. The divine mask changed. The mechanism remained. Power still whispers through images that promise meaning. The temple stands inside our pockets now. As you breathe softly, imagine sand drifting across forgotten carvings. The sun rises, revealing words carved to last forever. Even now they speak, reminding us that the oldest tool of empire was belief itself. The power of myth. Long before printing presses, people carried truth in stories. Around fires, elders spoke of gods and monsters that punished greed or rewarded courage. Myths were moral software for tribes. They taught order without armies, unity without kings. When rulers arrived, they simply plugged their names into the legend. "I am chosen," they declared, and belief obeyed. The first propaganda was not written, it was told. Each retelling polished power until it shone like faith. Ancient Greece gave myths new roles. Heroes like Achilles and Odysseus were painted on pottery, sung in markets, carved into stone. Every citizen learned virtue through repetition. The message was simple: greatness comes through loyalty. Theatre became a public classroom where emotion taught obedience. The stage mask hid politics inside poetry. Rome borrowed these tales and made them empire's heartbeat. Augustus claimed to be descended from Venus. Divine blood justified human rule. Myths became management systems, explaining conquest as destiny. Propaganda learned to smile. When a story feels beautiful, it hides its leash. Meaning glows between those lines. Myths survive because they comfort chaos. A universe with purpose feels safer than chance. Leaders exploit that need for order. They promise to keep the story alive, and themselves within it. We believe because belief feels like home. What this shows is how emotion outruns evidence. Facts fade, feelings echo. Propaganda feeds on that echo, shaping values by rhythm. Even today, modern heroes on screens play the same roles: savior, rebel, martyr. The myth never dies, it reboots. As moonlight falls on the last ember, imagine ancient storytellers fading into modern microphones. The tale continues, whispering through time. To rule a mind, you must first tell it who it is. The script of faith. Across deserts and mountains, parchment carried power. Holy books emerged as both guidance and governance. When people read or heard divine words, they did not question, they aligned. Every faith learned that truth, wrapped in mystery, binds tighter than chains. The prophets spoke of light and law, yet behind every revelation stood a structure. Who could interpret? Who could lead? Who could speak for the unseen? Propaganda turned sacred, its tone softened by prayer. Hearts obeyed willingly when the command came with promise of paradise. Medieval cathedrals rose like sermons in stone. Stained glass told stories to those who could not read. Each beam of colour was scripture for the eyes. Priests translated eternity into spectacle, ensuring belief required their voice. Architecture became argument. Every arch pointed toward authority. The crowd looked upward, finding both heaven and hierarchy. Propaganda had never been so beautiful. Meaning hides in devotion. Faith is not deceit, but emotion's purest form. When shaped by rulers, it turns into alignment. Religion unified kingdoms, settled wars, inspired art, and justified conquest. Crusaders marched under banners of holiness, convinced that violence could sanctify. The mind, when filled with purpose, stops asking why. What this shows is that faith's fire lights both creation and control. Leaders learn to ignite it with care, using ritual as rhythm. Chant and chorus synchronize thought. Propaganda became participation. Believers became its voice. No one forced the faithful. They volunteered belief. Connection stretches to our modern rituals. Crowds at concerts, fans before screens, movements chanting hope. The melody changed, the mechanics did not. Every age builds its altar, digital or divine, and gathers beneath it to feel belonging. As night deepens, imagine a cathedral silent after prayer. The candles still flicker, painting colour across empty pews. Somewhere between faith and fear, the story of obedience still whispers. The royal image. A crown alone cannot rule. It must dazzle. Kings and queens learned to paint themselves as symbols. Portraits became propaganda, each brushstroke arranged to suggest destiny. The pose of calm command, the gleam of velvet and gold, these were lessons in leadership disguised as beauty. Court painters were not mere artists. They were architects of illusion. The face of power became perfection itself. People bowed before pigment and light, believing they saw divine right. As centuries turned, the craft refined. Elizabethan glowed beneath pale, haloed skin untouched by age. Louis XIV stood in stage sunlight, a living sun to his people. Every monarch curated aura. Even rumours were sculpted, scandals repainted, weakness reworded. The message was always the same. Authority is elegance. Propaganda, dressed in lace, smiled from every frame. This history shows how aesthetics tame judgment. Beauty softens scrutiny. A ruler who looks radiant needs fewer guards. The eye becomes accomplice to control. To question the image feels like blasphemy against order. The portrait did not command loyalty, it invited it. Meaning glows in that invitation. Art became language of power long before screens. Each detail, the crown's tilt, the hand on sceptre, told viewers how to feel. Symbols bypassed logic and rooted in admiration. Admiration is obedience's cousin. Once love for the leader grows, critique withers. Connection extends easily to the modern stage. Celebrities, politicians, and influencers use filters where kings used painters. The throne became digital, but the gaze remains ancient. Perfection sells certainty. Certainty sells peace. Picture a portrait gallery in candlelight, frames gleaming like windows into reverence. Each face still watches, waiting to be believed. Propaganda smiles through time, flawless and eternal. Words that built nations' ink replaced armies. In the age of exploration and revolution, pamphlets and manifestos stirred millions. Words became maps of destiny, liberty, equality, justice. Small syllables with world-shaping weight. The printing press turned rebellion into rhythm, repeating until hearts marched to its beat. Propaganda wore noble robes. It called itself Enlightenment. From London to Boston, slogans rose like dawn. Thomas Paine wrote common sense, and common people believed. Across Europe, presses thundered louder than cannons. Revolutions fed on type and ink, each letter promising a fairer world. Yet every cause learned the same truth. The louder the call for freedom, the easier it was to guide the crowd. Meaning flickers between ink and intention. Ideas are tools. In skilled hands they build or bind. Propaganda learned nuance, the perfect blend of truth and hope. People followed willingly because belief tasted sweet. The art of persuasion reached new precision. Tell them they are free, and they will march anywhere. This history shows literacy as double-edged. Reading spread light, but also manipulation. The more people sought understanding, the more messages competed to claim it. Print democratized truth, but also democratized deceit. The noise of enlightenment birthed both democracy and demagoguery. Connection to our screens is direct. We share words faster, but the rhythm is the same. Every headline, every post carries invisible intent. The printing press became the algorithm's ancestor. Ink turned to pixels. Persuasion never left the page. As the press falls silent, imagine a single sheet of paper floating in candlelight, words glowing faintly. They whisper not to believe blindly, but to remember that even light casts shadows. Witch hunts and moral panics. Snow fell like ash across the silent roofs of the old world. The air smelled of smoke, fear, and faith. In small villages, people whispered of witches who soured milk, withered crops, and rode the wind. At night, doors bolted tight, while prayers floated upward like mist. Fear gathered around the unknown, and those who spoke calmly were often the first accused. The leaders saw opportunity in the trembling. They gave the fear a shape, a name, and a face. When they pointed to the widow, the healer, the poor wanderer, the crowd sighed in relief. Every confession was another stone laid in the wall of certainty. Fire became medicine. The scream, a sign that order had returned. Across Europe, sermons thundered from wooden pulpits. The devil walks among us, they warned, and the people nodded, grateful for explanation. Printing presses that once spread psalms now published guides for catching the unholy. Artists drew women with wild eyes and crooked fingers, images that taught dread faster than words could. Judges penned thick manuals on witchcraft, each rule giving madness a method. Propaganda had found a perfect disguise: righteousness. The crowd believed they were defending heaven, not committing horror, and because belief felt pure, it could not see its own darkness. Behind every trial flickered a deeper lesson. The crowd's mind is quicksand. It grips tighter the more it struggles. One accusation begot 10 more. One burned body guaranteed another would follow. Each echo of which was a chorus of control. Propaganda's essence lives in repetition. A lie, repeated, becomes relief. It does not need proof, only performance. The people shouted together and called it justice. The unity itself became intoxicating. The greater the fear, The closer they felt to one another, fear, when shared, feels like faith. This history shows how authority hides behind emotion. Rulers learned that outrage unites faster than law. The witch hunt offered both meaning and permission. To destroy was to purify. The firelight reflected off armour, off crosses, off trembling hands. The spectacle of punishment was propaganda's theatre. Fear turned into festival. The crowd did not merely watch, it participated, each cheer becoming another signature on the sentence. No tyrant could have asked for better volunteers. The same pattern breathes within modern noise. Social feeds, headlines, and whispers at work all carry embers of the past. Digital mobs form overnight, calling strangers evil, delighting in their fall. The names change, but the ritual endures. Accusation, outrage, cleansing. Propaganda no longer burns bodies, it burns reputations. The flames still glow, pixel by pixel, across screens we cannot look away from. The difference is only in the speed. Witch hunts now fit in pockets. When dawn arrives, picture the ashes of that ancient square. Snow covers them, soft as forgiveness. The air is cold, but no one listens for screams anymore. Beneath the quiet, the truth hums like a heartbeat. The easier story to believe is the one that lets us call ourselves righteous. We burn not from cruelty, but from comfort. History reminds us that the darkest persuasion is always painted in light. The Enlightenment's dark mirror. Candles trembled beside stacks of books that promised reason. Philosophers whispered of liberty, equality, and progress. The air itself seemed brighter. Humanity believed it had awakened from superstition. Yet inside that glow, shadows grew. Words once written for prayer now served ideology. Pamphlets replaced sermons, and scholars replaced priests. Every thinker sought to free minds, but also to shape them. The Enlightenment taught people to question kings, but not themselves. The dream of reason revealed its secret twin, persuasion disguised as truth. Across Europe, printing presses clattered like drumbeats of awakening. Ideas of natural rights and social contracts filled cafes and parliaments. Revolutionaries learned to harness logic as melody. Their leaflets sounded rational yet pulsed with emotion. Liberty or death, they cried, wrapping fury in philosophy. The crowds did not read essays. They absorbed feeling. Words that promised freedom burned hotter than fire. The pen that once enlightened now incited. Propaganda had grown sophisticated, rational in form, romantic in aim. History remembers this as progress, and it was. But every revelation has its reflection. The same printing press that spread democracy printed decrees of empire. The same scientists who proved equality measured skulls to claim superiority. Knowledge, once worshipped, became weapon. Leaders discovered that reason's authority could sanctify almost anything. If the argument sounded logical, the conscience slept soundly. Propaganda had learned a new rhythm. Make belief sound intelligent. Meaning glows within that paradox. The mind craves clarity more than truth. Slogans like liberty, nation, and science offered comfort through simplicity. Each word seemed pure, but purity is brittle. When cracked, it cuts. The crowd traded doubt for doctrine written in elegant language. The Enlightenment freed thought from kings only to crown ideas as monarchs. Dogma changed robes, but not demeanour. People knelt now before reason itself. What this shows us is humility's absence. To think clearly, one must doubt even one's own clarity. Yet the age that preached skepticism worships certainty. Propaganda thrives where intellect forgets compassion. When knowledge divorces empathy, it becomes cold command. The philosopher and the propagandist differ only in motive, not in method. Both persuade through structure and repetition. The line between education and indoctrination fades when hearts stop listening. Connection stretches quietly into our own screens, We call it information instead of illumination, but the pattern persists. Each era believes it has escaped illusion, and each builds new ones. The digital age still bows to data as the Enlightenment bowed to logic. Truth remains hostage to whoever tells the better story. As the candle sputters, imagine the scholar alone in his study, pages glowing amber. He believes he writes for freedom, not knowing his words will one day serve power. The ink dries, the lesson remains. Even light, when unguarded, can blind. Napoleon's mirror mist clung to the morning fields as drums rolled across Europe. A lone figure on a white horse rode through smoke and silence. Napoleon Bonaparte, master of armies and imagination. He knew that glory was half battle, half portrait. Painters stretched his posture. Poets stretched the truth. He let them. Image was empire. Each canvas of his calm gaze conquered more minds than his cannon ever could. He understood what few before him had. The crowd does not follow a man, it follows a myth. Printers filled the streets with his face. Coins bore his profile, medals his initials. The name Napoleon became more than ruler, it became rhythm. Even defeat could not break it. Artists simply renamed loss as noble sacrifice. The mind prefers story over statistics, and Napoleon wrote better stories than any historian could. His soldiers marched to music and meaning, believing themselves eternal. The general did not just command armies, he conducted emotions. History sees him as ambition embodied, but his genius was psychological. He studied people as carefully as maps. You must speak to the soul, he said, and did. Speeches, proclamations, uniforms, each detail crafted loyalty. Propaganda under Napoleon was not lies, it was theatre. Every victory parade, every stage gesture was rehearsal for remembrance. When citizens saw him, they saw themselves reflected strong and certain. His mirror became their identity. Meaning lies in that reflection. The crowd's love is the ruler's armour. People need heroes to measure hope, and he supplied them with perfection. Propaganda thrives wherever admiration silences doubt. Napoleon discovered that unity born of awe lasts longer than unity born of fear. When a leader becomes symbol, questioning him feels like treason against one's own dream. This pattern echoes endlessly. Every nation since has painted its leaders in the same confident light. Cameras replaced canvases, but the trick remains identical. Control the frame. Control the faith. The strong jaw, the firm gaze, the promise of destiny. These are the brushstrokes of authority. Napoleon's portrait still hangs in every televised smile. As the fog clears, imagine a gallery lined with his likeness. Identical eyes, identical pride. Step closer and you see your own reflection staring back. That is the power of the mirror. It never flatters truth, only belief. 640 words total. Industrial minds. Steam hissed from iron towers, blackening skies and hearts. The Industrial Revolution thundered into being, and with it, a new kind of propaganda. Mechanical, measured, magnificent. Printing presses clanked beside machines that spun cotton and dreams. Posters adorned factory walls, urging loyalty, progress, and pride. Work makes strength, they claimed, long before such words turned sinister. Industry promised salvation through labour, and propaganda translated that promise into rhythm. Cities grew as sermons to production. Railways pulsed like veins. Smokestacks became spires. Every billboard preached the gospel of growth. The worker was saint, the machine his altar. Songs of progress echoed through soot-choked streets. Behind each anthem stood the owners, smiling through advertisements. Propaganda wore overalls now. It called itself motivation. To question it felt ungrateful. The hum of engines drowned dissent. History remembers this as modernization, but it was also mesmerism. Repetition became ritual. Whistles marked the hours, schedules marked the soul. When humans moved like gears, Thinking like one became natural. Propaganda no longer needed fear, it had routine. Habit trained obedience better than punishment ever could. Order was efficient, efficiency was virtue. Meaning lives in the machine's steady pulse. Industrial propaganda replaced sermons with slogans. The words progress, efficiency, and patriotism fused until indistinguishable. The crowd believed not because it was deceived, but because it was busy. A tired worker rarely questions the purpose of his labour. Productivity became the moral of modern life. The mind that never rests never rebels. What this era shows is that influence thrives in noise. When the world clanks too loudly, silence feels dangerous. Factory sirens and printing presses taught humanity to equate movement with meaning. Today's screens hum with the same illusion. Constant activity mistaken for progress. The wheel still turns. The slogans still sing. As dusk settles over an abandoned mill, you can almost hear those echoes. Iron striking iron. The heartbeat of belief built into every machine. Progress is never neutral. It always serves someone. The colonial imagination ships slice through silver waves, their sails swollen with wind and certainty. The explorers spoke of discovery, yet carried maps already drawn. Empires whispered of destiny, not greed. They called conquest civilization and drew halos around their cannons. Propaganda painted the world in two tones, enlightened and savage. To rule others became moral duty. The human mind loves adventure when it wears virtue's mask. Artists and authors joined the voyage. Painters depicted golden beaches awaiting flags. Poets wrote of noble savages, a phrase half compliment, half chain. Science joined in, measuring skulls and labelling souls. Every discipline became accomplice to empire. Words like progress and order justified plunder. Propaganda smiled from textbooks and travelogues alike, polishing cruelty into curiosity, meaning hums in those polished lies. Colonialism did not merely conquer land, it conquered narrative. To tell a story is to own it. When one culture defines another, it claims the right to judge. The map was never neutral. Each border drawn in ink was drawn first in ideology. Power's first conquest is always imagination. History calls it exploration, but the conquered called it intrusion. Still, many believed, posters promised adventure, riches, salvation. Missionaries preached love while wielding law. Even the oppressed absorbed pieces of the tale. Propaganda's greatest triumph is when victims echo the victor's song. The empire's myths outlived the empire itself. Connection echoes still in modern language. Words like developed and backward carry colonial shadows. Advertisements speak of global outreach. Digital empires map our minds instead of continents. The ships now sail the sea of data, but their flags are the same. Ownership through narrative. As twilight falls over old harbours, imagine waves lapping at rotting hulls. The water erases borders the way time erases excuses. Empires fade, but their stories remain, whispering of how easy it is to call conquest enlightenment, the machine of nationalism. Trumpets sounded and banners unfurled. In the 19th century, nations learned to sing. Flags fluttered not as cloth, but as identity. Propaganda became anthem and emblem. It told farmers, workers, and merchants that they were not merely individuals but citizens of a grand idea. The concept of we grew louder than the voice of I. Songs and parades stitched millions of strangers into one heartbeat. The art of persuasion no longer aimed to rule people, it aimed to merge them. The nation became the stage and everyone the actor. Posters painted unity in bright colours. Children were taught to salute, soldiers to chant, poets to glorify. Schools became small factories of patriotism. Textbooks spoke of destiny and heritage, editing history to fit harmony. Propaganda was no longer confined to speeches, it lived in lullabies and holidays. When everyone repeats the same song, belief becomes instinct. Nationalism found its power not in reason but in rhythm. History calls this the Age of Awakening, but much of it was rehearsal. People learned to cheer before they learned to question. The word homeland carried warmth that discouraged doubt. Propaganda's genius lay in emotion's camouflage. It felt noble to obey. The flag became both shield and leash. When waved high enough, it blinded those beneath it. Meaning glows within this unity. To belong is human. To be used through belonging is history's oldest trick. The nation needed love to live, and it borrowed hearts willingly. Each citizen became a pixel in a larger portrait, every face painted in the same palette. The beauty of solidarity hid the danger of silence. The same mechanism hums today, only faster. Online, slogans spread like confetti. Pride becomes performance. Digital borders rise where physical ones fade. We still chant, still march, still mirror the rhythm of propaganda disguised as patriotism. The melody never ended. It simply changed its instruments. As the last horn fades, imagine a square empty after the parade. Confetti glitters under moonlight, silent yet triumphant. Even in stillness, the echo of belonging hums softly, reminding us how easily devotion becomes direction. The first mass media, the 20th century, began with ink and ended with static. Radio waves and newsreels transformed whispers into thunder. Propaganda gained a megaphone. Governments realized they could now speak to millions at once, shaping hearts with sound and image instead of decree. For the first time, belief had a broadcast schedule. The age of communication was also the age of coordination. What people heard together, they felt together. During wars, these tools became weapons. Posters declared duty. Radios played victory marches. Newsreels edited truth into triumph. A voice from the wireless became more trusted than the neighbour next door. The crowd no longer needed to gather physically. It gathered through emotion. The rhythm of propaganda was now mechanical, amplified, precise. Every broadcast a ritual, every listener a participant. History remembers the great speeches, the booming voices promising hope, vengeance, or pride. The microphone made charisma eternal. When words could travel faster than thought, persuasion became performance. Facts mattered less than feeling. A trembling voice could move armies more than 1,000 treaties. Propaganda had become music. Meaning lies in that melody. The power of media is not its message but its intimacy. A whisper through a radio feels personal, even when it comes from empire. The listener imagines connection, and connection erases caution. By speaking gently, authority entered the living room unnoticed. Today's screens still hum with the same spell. The face is changed, but the formula stands. Influence now streams in high definition, but the principle remains ancient. Trust the familiar, follow the feeling. The newsfeed replaced the newsreel. The voice remains inside the ear. As static fades, imagine a family in the 1930s leaning toward the radio's glow. The father smiles, the mother nods, the children dream. They do not see the invisible conductor directing their hearts. The age of spectacle lights flashed, trumpets blared, and the crowd gasped. The early 20th century discovered the power of performance. Rallies became theatre, leaders became actors, the audience became believers. Propaganda was no longer content to be read. It had to be seen. Cinemas played newsreels that showed power marching in perfect symmetry. Emotion replaced argument. Spectacle replaced substance. The eye obeyed faster than the mind could doubt. Architecture joined the chorus. Stadiums and monuments rose like cathedrals to ideology. Giant banners rippled over seas of synchronized salutes. Aesthetics became allegiance. The camera adored order. The audience adored belonging. When the leader stepped onto the balcony, Light framed him like revelation. The crowd erupted not in logic but in awe. Propaganda had become divine choreography. History later recoiled at these images, but their artistry remains undeniable. The danger of beauty is that it convinces before it explains. The rallies of the 1930s were masterpieces of manipulation, blending music, architecture, and myth into one command: believe. The film reel immortalized illusion. Even decades later, those black and white frames still hum with hypnotic precision. Meaning glows within that harmony. When order appears perfect, dissent feels like defect. Spectacle teaches obedience without words. It builds identity through spectacle's comfort, everyone moving, shouting, and shining together. It feels safe to be one of many. Propaganda whispers that unity is purity. Purity demands silence. Modern concerts, sports events, and political rallies still borrow the same design: lights, rhythm, chants, climax. The medium modernized, not the method. The crowd remains the stage, the emotion remains the script. To understand propaganda is to see the choreography beneath applause. As the projector clicks to a stop, imagine the empty stadium after cheers fade. The flags hang limp, the lights dim, but the echo of unity lingers like perfume. Words as weapons. As the world slid into war, words sharpened like blades. Newspapers, speeches, and radio plays turned language into ammunition. Each nation wrote its truth. Each enemy became monster. Propaganda offices worked around the clock, crafting stories that stirred loyalty and fear in equal measure. Posters showed heroes, smiling and villains sneering. Lies did not hide in shadows. They marched proudly across headlines. The world was divided by adjectives. During the wars, governments discovered the precision of language. Censorship became choreography. Bad news was rewritten as bravery. Defeat renamed strategic withdrawal. Words did not describe reality, they decided it. When people spoke the same slogans, reality itself seemed to obey. Propaganda reached its peak efficiency, total immersion. The dictionary became a battlefield, meaning ripples through every report and radio broadcast. A single phrase, for the homeland, for the cause, overpowered the complexity of conscience. Soldiers marched under grammar's spell. When speech carries sacred tone, resistance feels profane. Propaganda's grammar builds faith faster than its facts. It edits the world into black and white, hero and traitor. This era proved that emotion outguns evidence. The more a nation suffers, the more it needs meaning. Slogans offered that meaning wrapped in rhythm. People needed hope, and propaganda sold it wholesale. It did not need to convince everyone, only to keep them moving. Modern politics still hums with these echoes. Freedom, security, truth. Words wielded like flags. Each promises safety while inviting surrender. Propaganda no longer shouts, it serenades. Its vocabulary remains ancient, only its accent has changed. As the typewriters fall silent, imagine the words themselves, floating above a battlefield of papers. Ink drips like blood, spelling victory, spelling loss, spelling belief. Shadows of ideology. After the guns quieted, words kept fighting. The Cold War began not with bombs but with beliefs. East and West built mirrors of one another, each reflecting itself as saviour. Propaganda was now global theatre. Posters, movies, and radio waves painted freedom and tyranny in opposing hues. The struggle was psychological, a contest for the human mind. It was no longer about land, it was about loyalty. Both sides mastered the art of invisible persuasion. Spies spread rumours, teachers shaped curriculums, artists encoded messages into film and song. Every movie ticket carried meaning, every newspaper line a subtle reminder of our goodness and their deceit. The war of ideology was not fought in trenches, but in living rooms and classrooms. Propaganda had gone domestic, meaning glimmers in that quiet war. Neither side believed they were lying. Each believed they were protecting truth. That conviction made their messages unstoppable. To disagree became disloyal. Fear froze thought faster than censorship ever could. Propaganda learned its final lesson. Control is most stable when it feels voluntary. History often pictures the Cold War in grey, men in coats, cities in fog. But its true colour was persuasion. Cartoons taught suspicion. Films sold confidence. Every child knew who the hero was before the plot began. Culture itself became the front line. Today the echoes remain. Memes, slogans and influencers carry the same coded scripts. Each side of every argument now builds its own mirror world. The Cold War never ended. It digitized. Propaganda's power lies in its subtlety, its ability to make us mistake reflection for truth. As the last radio hums in static, imagine the empty offices once filled with maps and microphones. The war of ideas still hums beneath silence. The world no longer fears bombs, it fears misunderstanding. Advertising the dream neon lights flickered above crowded streets. After the wars ended, the world craved comfort, and propaganda found a new disguise. Advertising. Billboards promised happiness in bottles, beauty in creams, status in steel. Propaganda no longer shouted from podiums, it smiled from shop windows. It whispered that fulfillment could be purchased, that desire was destiny. The message was simple and soothing. To buy was to belong. The art of persuasion moved from battlefield to marketplace, yet its mission stayed the same, to shape the soul through stories. Television became the new cathedral. Families knelt before glowing screens, learning how to live from jingles and sitcoms. Every product carried a parable. Soap as purity, cars as freedom, soda as friendship. Advertising spoke in symbols, not arguments. It did not inform, it enchanted. Each commercial built a miniature world where smiling faces solved loneliness with a purchase. Propaganda had discovered paradise on credit, meaning gleams behind the slogans. Advertisers studied psychology, learning how colour, rhythm and repetition could bypass logic. They discovered that emotion sells best when it looks effortless. The word want replaced need, and the crowd never noticed the switch. Propaganda no longer demanded loyalty, it invited pleasure. It offered escape rather than obedience, yet both led to control. History remembers this as prosperity, but it was also persuasion perfected. The same techniques once used to win wars now won wallets. Mass production required mass belief. Propaganda turned personal, embedding itself in dreams and daily routines. It taught people not only what to buy, but who to be. Identity became inventory. The pattern endures in every glowing ad and scrolling feed. The face of power smiles now, polished by algorithms instead of artists. We no longer fear propaganda because it flatters us. That is its final brilliance, control disguised as choice. As the last commercial fades to static, imagine a neon sign flickering alone above an empty street, selling nothing but light. The dream remains illuminated, waiting to be believed again. The language of fear. In quiet times, fear sells faster than hope. Governments and media learned this truth early in the century of television. Every headline, every broadcast, every siren became a hook for attention. Fear unified and distracted. It was easy to steer a frightened crowd. Propaganda refined the art of anxiety, teaching people that vigilance was virtue, to worry was to care, to question was to risk. Fear became patriotism in disguise. News networks learned rhythm. Crisis at dawn, scandal by noon, debate by dusk. Each cycle left citizens too dizzy to discern direction. When panic becomes constant, authority feels like calm. Propaganda does not need to invent threats. It only needs to echo them loudly. The human brain, ancient and alert, fills in the rest. A trembling audience obeys the voice that sounds certain, meaning lurks behind the sirens. Fear narrows thought, shrinking futures into simple choices. Us or them, safe or sorry, trust or chaos. Propaganda thrives on binary worlds because anxiety hates ambiguity. When truth feels uncertain, even falsehood feels like safety. The most powerful dictatorships never silence people. They flood them with noise until silence feels unbearable. History shows that every age invents its monsters. Witches, traitors, terrorists, diseases. Each generation names its fear and paints it on posters. The details change, the heartbeat stays the same. Fear persuades faster than logic because it feels like instinct. It bypasses argument, crawling straight into the spine. Modern feeds run on that same current. Algorithms amplify outrage because outrage keeps eyes open. Every notification a spark, every headline a warning. We scroll not for knowledge, but for reassurance that danger has not yet reached us. The screens glow, and the mind tightens its grip. As the broadcast ends, imagine the studio lights dimming, the anchors silent, the world suddenly quiet. The silence feels strange, almost frightening, proof that the spell still holds. The cold logic of science lab coats replaced robes, charts replaced chants. The mid-20th century worshipped progress under the name of science. Yet even truth can be twisted when authority wears a white coat. Governments and corporations sponsored experiments and statistics that served their image. Propaganda wrapped itself in precision. Studies show became the new scripture. Numbers whispered what power wanted said. Science itself was not the villain. Misuse was. From social engineering to nuclear pride, facts became flexible when framed by funding. Films and posters depicted scientists as saviours, turning complexity into certainty. The citizen need not understand the formula, only trust it. Propaganda learned to sound rational while selling emotion. It replaced superstition with data-driven devotion. Meaning glows beneath the microscope's lens. Facts persuade best when they flatter belief. During wars, laboratories promised miracles. During peace, they promised comfort. Atomic power, vaccines, rockets, all symbols of progress packaged as proof of superiority. Propaganda found a perfect partner in discovery. Every invention became advertisement for ideology. History reveals the irony. While one nation bragged of curing disease, another bragged of conquering space. The rivalry of science became theatre for national pride. Even the stars became slogans. The more precise the measurement, the more blurred the morality. When progress is praised without purpose, it becomes propaganda disguised as proof. Today, we still hear echoes in charts and headlines. Numbers justify policies. Algorithms judge people. Data has replaced truth. Yet data too can deceive when wielded with intent. The mind bows easily before graphs it cannot read. Propaganda no longer burns books. It buries facts beneath floods of statistics. As lab lights dim, imagine an empty test tube glowing faintly blue. Inside it, reflection of a world certain it knows everything, yet unsure why it must. The television oracle. The screen blinked, and the century changed. Television entered homes like a gentle guest and stayed as ruler. Families gathered nightly, not around tables, but around light. Propaganda's newest form smiled with sincerity. The news anchor's calm tone, the sitcom's laughter, the advertisement's jingle, each blended comfort with command. People trusted what looked familiar, and television perfected familiarity. Networks learned to choreograph emotion. Commercials followed tragedies. Speeches followed laughter. The audience's heartbeat became predictable. Every pause, every cut, every fade tuned persuasion to rhythm. Propaganda no longer needed to convince, it only needed to entertain. The story did the rest, meaning shimmers behind that flicker. The television did not tell people what to think, it told them what to feel. Images replaced arguments. The medium became the message, as one philosopher warned. Truth shortened into sound bites, complexity edited out. When viewers stopped remembering before the next program began, propaganda had achieved immortality. History called this progress in connection. Politicians mastered stagecraft, actors became ambassadors of belief, elections turned into spectacles, wars into broadcasts, even tragedy became programming. The world learned to mourn and cheer on schedule. Propaganda had become prime time. The pattern survives in every glowing screen today. Streams replaced stations, influencers replaced anchors. Yet the language remains: smile, promise, repeat. The audience is still captive, though the cage now fits in a palm. The oracle of light still speaks softly, endlessly, intimately. When the screen finally fades to black, imagine the reflection of your own face in the glass. The glow fades, but the story remains inside your eyes. The corporate voice skyscrapers rose like new kingdoms, and their logos became crowns. Corporations discovered that persuasion could scale. Public relations, once a political tool, became a business necessity. Companies spoke like people, friendly, humorous, wise. Propaganda wore a suit, smiled, and said, "Trust me." The line between product and philosophy blurred. Consumers no longer bought objects, they bought meaning. A drink was now happiness, a shoe courage, a phone freedom. Behind that charm stood architects of image. Focus groups replaced forums, slogans replaced scriptures. The language of brands borrowed from religion, faith, community, ritual. Advertising became a shared belief system, its commandments simple: consume, connect, repeat. The corporate voice spoke softly, yet everywhere, meaning pulses beneath the market's hum. Propaganda had finally gone private. It no longer needed governments to function. Commerce carried the message more efficiently. The pursuit of profit aligned perfectly with persuasion. Each billboard, each jingle, each logo whispered unity through desire. The citizen became consumer. The prayer became purchase. History marks this as the dawn of globalization. Borders blurred as slogans translated seamlessly. The same smiles appeared from Tokyo to Toronto, identical promises in different tongues. Propaganda reached its purest form, pleasant, persuasive, profitable. The marketplace became the monastery. Today, corporations speak faster than nations. Their messages shape ethics, culture, and even identity. Propaganda's final evolution is invisibility. When every brand sells belonging, resistance feels lonely. The voice that sells comfort also defines it. We do not fight the system, we subscribe to it. As night settles over the glass towers, imagine the city glowing with billboards and screens, every light a sermon, every reflection a believer. Propaganda smiles from every window, patient as prophet. The colour of revolution. Crowds fill the streets, banners high and hearts aflame. In the late 20th century, television captured revolutions in real time. Propaganda no longer needed to hide. It wore rebellion's colours. Images of courage flooded screens, fists raised, walls falling, voices rising. Each movement told its story to the world, and the world believed it was watching truth unfold. Yet behind every broadcast, narratives were shaped, edited, translated. The revolution was televised and choreographed. Governments and activists alike learned the new grammar of visuals. The right frame could make protest look like victory, or chaos look like evil. A single photograph could inspire or destroy. Propaganda adapted to emotion at lightning speed, using cameras as catalysts. In the battle for hearts, the lens was the loudest weapon. Meaning vibrates through those moments. Revolutions need myth as much as momentum. Each crowd becomes character, each chant a chapter. Propaganda feeds on that drama, simplifying complexity into symbols. The people in the streets become saints or sinners, depending on who edits the footage. History, like cinema, is always directed by someone. What this teaches is humility before the image. The more moving a picture, the more carefully it must be questioned. The revolution's purity often hides politics behind the lens. Propaganda thrives in passion because passion feels holy. It replaces understanding with urgency and calls it progress. Modern feeds replay the same performance. Viral clips, slogans, hashtags. Each reduces pain to pixels, outrage to rhythm. The world still watches through screens, mistaking empathy for awareness. Propaganda has become participation itself, the click, the share, the feeling of change without its cost. As fireworks fade over city squares, imagine a single flag drifting down through smoke. Beneath it, faces glow in phone light, believing they have seen history. Perhaps they have, but only part of it. The digital hive. A pulse travels through wires, faster than thought. The internet arrived like a gift, promising freedom of speech and connection for all. Yet freedom's twin is influence. Propaganda entered the network silently, disguised as conversation. Every comment, every post, every trend became a thread in a vast unseen web of persuasion. The new rulers were invisible, their crowns made of code. At first the hive buzzed with joy, voices multiplied, opinions bloomed. But soon, algorithms learned desire better than we did. They amplified anger, rewarded outrage, and silenced calm. Propaganda evolved from pushing ideas to predicting reactions. It no longer needed to convince. It simply showed each person what they already wanted to believe. Meaning hums within that circuitry. The digital hive reflects, repeats, and reshapes thought. When every user curates their own truth, control becomes collective. The machine learns to echo emotion until it feels divine. We mistake recognition for revelation. Propaganda no longer tells us who we are. It asks us to prove it again and again with every click. History cannot record this fully yet because it happens in real time. We live inside the experiment. Every meme, every headline, every share adds weight to the invisible scale of belief. The architects of influence no longer need armies or anthems, just algorithms. The illusion of choice is propaganda's masterpiece. To scroll is to surrender softly. When everyone shouts, truth hides in the noise, yet amid the chaos the pattern remains. The more connected we become, the more predictable we are. Propaganda has gone viral, coded in the heartbeat of humanity's need to belong. When the screen dims, imagine billions of tiny lights fading one by one across the planet. Each spark a thought, each glow a belief, all pulsing in perfect unison. The politics of identity. The internet gave everyone a voice, and every voice a label. Identities multiplied like stars, bright and beautiful yet fragile. Propaganda found fertile ground in that diversity. It learned to divide through belonging. It whispered that loyalty to one's group was virtue, that difference meant danger. Every movement became mirror and wall at once. The crowd no longer needed to be united. It only needed to be divided efficiently. Social platforms became arenas of affirmation. Algorithms rewarded agreement, punishing nuance. Propaganda had discovered its perfect ecosystem. Endless tribes, endless truth, endless conflict. The louder the identity, the easier the control. Each echo chamber grew louder until even whispers became war cries. The architecture of belief became fractal. Meaning gleams in this fragmentation. The self, once shaped by culture, is now curated by code. Propaganda doesn't need to invent new lies, it only needs to tailor old ones. The illusion of autonomy keeps users loyal. When everyone is their own hero, every disagreement feels like apocalypse. The personal becomes political, and the political becomes perpetual. History warns of this cycle. Nations once divided by borders now divide by belief. Empires once built on conquest now thrive on attention. The battlefield is no longer land or ideology, it's identity. Propaganda feeds that hunger for recognition, telling each side they are righteous, misunderstood, and threatened. The pattern continues quietly. Every click sharpens the walls between us and them. Propaganda smiles, knowing unity built on division is eternal. It needs no flag, no leader, just emotion and echo. As the digital noise softens for a moment, imagine countless faces staring at their reflections through glowing screens. They seek truth, yet each sees only themselves refracted 1,000 times. The algorithm of desire. In the quiet hum of servers, a new kind of priesthood arose. Engineers, unseen and unblamed, built algorithms that learned our hearts better than we could. They did not command, they recommended. Every video, every post, every song was selected by invisible intuition. Propaganda had become personalization. We were no longer targets, we were data. And data, once mined, became destiny. At first, it felt like magic. The machine knew our taste, our humour, our mood. But soon, the pattern deepened. The algorithm did not just respond, it guided. Each choice shaped the next, until curiosity circled itself. Freedom became a loop. Propaganda, once broadcast, was now bespoke. Each of us lived in a world handcrafted for comfort and control. Meaning hides in the convenience. The system does not lie, it curates. It replaces the unknown with the familiar until exploration feels unsafe. That gentle guidance is the softest form of power. The algorithm doesn't argue, it anticipates. And because it predicts pleasure, we call it progress. History has never seen persuasion so patient. No empires to fear, no flags to wave, only endless content. The machine's mercy is its subtlety. It never shouts, it scrolls. The result is not oppression but inertia. We stay still because everything moves around us. Today, propaganda is no longer a speech, it's a feed. The algorithm whispers endlessly, "You're right. You belong. You're home." The future of control is comfort. The mind that never hungers, never questions. When the lights of your screen dim, imagine an endless library of glowing paths leading back to the same room. The door was never locked. We simply stopped walking. The eternal echo. The story of propaganda has no ending because it has no enemy. Every age believes it has outgrown illusion, yet illusion adapts faster. From stone carvings to screens, the message remains. Control through comfort. Faith through familiarity. The dark science endures because it works not on ignorance but on emotion. We do not believe because we are fooled, we believe because we want to. In the mirror of history, every tool of freedom becomes a tool of persuasion. The voice that once called for unity now sells division. The image that once inspired hope now markets despair. Propaganda never forces, it invites. It waits patiently for the heart to open, then fills the silence. The more human we become, the better it learns to imitate us. Meaning hums across the centuries. The same brain that painted gods in temples now paints heroes on timelines. The same desire that sought truth still craves validation. Propaganda is not an invader, it is our reflection with intent. Its strength lies in our longing for belonging. What history teaches is not despair, but awareness. To recognize persuasion is not to escape it, but to balance it. Every story holds both signal and shadow. The cure for manipulation is mindfulness, not cynicism. To listen deeply is the truest rebellion. The world ahead will shimmer with smarter illusions, kinder voices, and invisible control. But every illusion fades in the light of understanding. The mirror cracks, and through it, we may finally see ourselves, not as victims, but as authors. As dawn touches the edges of your imagination, picture all the centuries glowing faintly together, a long chain of belief leading to this moment. You are both listener and storyteller now. The next chapter waits for your voice. If this journey stirred your curiosity, keep exploring with us. History doesn't repeat, it rewires. Subscribe to Psychological Historian and join others who see the world through both wonder and wisdom. Each story uncovers how human psychology built civilization's greatest myths and its greatest mistakes. Awareness is not resistance, it is evolution. Let's keep learning how ideas shape us before they sell us. The next tale begins where this one ends. As the echo fades, remember this: propaganda is not evil. It is human. It lives wherever emotion meets ambition. The challenge is not to silence it, but to see it clearly. When we understand how stories guide us, we can choose which ones to follow. Sleep peacefully now, knowing awareness is armor and curiosity is compass. Tomorrow's truth begins with how you listen tonight.